Hello and welcome guys, my name is Badger and welcome to another glorious painting video. And in today's video we'll be checking out the 14th Legion, also known as the Death Guard. I do have some 40k Death Guard, but this will probably be the first Death Guard that I'll be painting up for Horus Heresy. So do make sure you got your coffee, get your cup of tea, get some biscuits potentially, and let's just get stuck into it. All right, and here we have the miniature that we'll be painting today, already primed in black as per always. Here's the first color we're going to put down. We're going to put down some Zandri dust. It is a base color. As you can see, it's probably watered down a bit too much. We are indeed going to do multiple coats. So we did do a few more coats than really required, but we got there in the end. Perseverance, patience, and practice. Those are the 3 Ps of painting. All right, as you can see, that was the first coat right there, and it was very watered down. So, time for a second coat. Let's get it on there. This is slightly less watered down. I think the room was quite warm, and it was the paint was sort of drying up a little bit. So I made the most of it to get this second coat down. Getting those coats on, hopefully as quickly as possible. Getting the third coat on. Right now to the upper thigh. That lower leg is looking a bit patchy. I think this is the third and final coat that I do. All right, that looks like it's it. Third coat and the final coat, I believe. So we're going to move on to the next stage, which in this case is going to be, we're going to use some Serephim Sepia. I would have probably just used Agrax Earthshade, to be honest, but I realized I didn't have this paint. And in a sort of effort to use just GW paints going forward for specifically GW miniatures, or at least the sort of basic sort of tabletop ready at least painting videos, I just want to try and use GW paints. So I realized I didn't get this paint, so I purchased it. There was a slight bit of paint I saw on the back of that foot there, which is not quite as smooth as it could have been. However, we are going to run this Serephim Sepia into all of the panels. It doesn't matter if we sort of make a bit of a mess, because we can always go back later and tidy stuff up, but run this color into all of the panel lines, such as those sort of vents at the back of the upper leg, lower back of the calf, and the panel lines there, the foot. It's going on quite thickly, which I guess is fine. It really depends on your own personal preference. You can obviously, you don't have to use Serephim Sepia. You could use Agrax Earthshade and get a similar-ish effect at the end of the day. But as I said, I haven't used this particular paint before. I thought I'd give it a go. So that's basically all you have to do for the armor panels. And at this point, I'm going to use Skavenblight dinge. Now I use this color for the rubber, I'm calling it rubber, the undersuit of these Space Marines. I do it for all of my miniatures now. I use it as the standard color. I used to use another color, but obviously for these videos I'm trying to stay with GW. Thin it down, make sure it gets into all of the crevices of the rubber suit. You can't quite see it there. We're trying to get that sort of bit right above that thigh plate right there. Getting the other side of it can be a bit of a difficulty, depending on which leg you're painting, especially when it sort of crosses over near the other one. Like right now, it's not ideal to record because, as you can see, it's, well, the other leg is in the way. But we get there in the end. Also try and get those bits of tubing. I do sometimes forget, I've realised, and had to come back and paint them later, but the sort of little bits of tubing between the upper and lower leg, or the lower leg and the foot, etc. Occasionally you'll see a little bit of interconnecting pipe, and I usually paint that with this colour. Alright, Nuln oil. So this colour is our shading colour. We're going to use that over the Skavenblight dinge. Make sure it gets an even coat over all of the Skavenblight dinge, not just running it into the recesses. We want it to tint both the surface of the paint and provide shadow in the crevices. So that's what we've done. Nice even coat. And then that's all we need to do, really. All right, and now we're back to the Zandri dust. We're going to use this to tidy up any sort of disasters that happened with the Serephim Sepia. Obviously, we rarely make mistakes, but just in case you do make a mistake, folks, go back, use the base color or the initial color, whatever it was you used, to tidy up any sort of little disasters, and we can get back to a sort of a clean slate as quickly as we can. All right, and here we've got Ushabti Bone. This is where I made a slight hiccup. My brain just went completely bananas. I started off just edge highlighting with this color, and then realized later on that I made a complete disaster of it. And let's change the scene from that to, keep that in mind, to this. Okay, so you may have noticed there's been a bit of a difference. I realized that I've made a complete and utter pig's ear of it, to put it bluntly. So I basically went over almost everything. I left the Serephim Sepia covered Zandri dust in the sort of dark recesses. And I basically built the Ushabti bone base up. Ushabti bone, I think it definitely does need a base coat, a brighter one than black primer. So while it wasn't the end of the world, it's not what I had in mind for this tutorial. I made a bit of a hiccup, so I do apologize. But we just built the built this armor panel up with a couple of coats of Ushabti bone over the previous coats of Zandri dust to bring it up to a nice bright color. That's looking much better, much more like a Death Guard. Now, Screaming Skull is our edge highlight that we're going to use. So basically, replicating what we did earlier before I realized I'd made a disaster, we're going to edge highlight all of the edges with the brighter tone of Screaming Skull, running a nice sort of thin line over the top of that upper boot part, the edge of the lower armor, those sort of weird toe things. Get all the edges with a nice clean coat of Screaming Skull. You may have to do 2 coats as per usual, but sometimes you might not need to, so do it as many times as you require to get the result that you need. The issue with batch painting that I have occasionally, if you do sort of 10 miniatures at a time, replicating each thing on each separate miniature, so going through like Zandri dust, everything, then edge highlighting with Ushabti bone, and then realizing I've made a mistake 10 times across 10 different miniatures. It's definitely a disaster. So doing a test miniature to begin with, and then replicating that is generally how I like to do my batch painting. Once I've got that sort of technique down, I replicate it, but only after I've practiced it on a couple of miniatures if required. Much better. I'm much happier with that. What am I doing here? I'm probably just going back and getting a couple of little extra pieces. Yeah, just the end of the boot and the sort of toe things. Right, folks, we're going to do the shoulder pads. We've got Deathworld Forest right here, and right here we've got Death Guard Green, which is ultimately the one I went with. Deathworld Forest was slightly too brown and not suitable for this shoulder pad. However, you can see it is very thin. So, well, I've thinned it down a lot. So, as always, multiple coats. There's been quite a few times when I've forgotten to do the under bits of the shoulder pads and only realized much later that they're still sort of just primed. So do get the under bits of the shoulder pad. Wait for this to dry, like so. Come back, repeat the process. I think this is quite a thin color. Unfortunately, I didn't seem to paint this bit on camera. I was just casually painting it off camera. Okay, that is the end of our second coat of Death Guard Green. And we're coming back with a third coat. Hopefully the final coat. Make sure it's nice and even, as always. Just like so. All right, now we're breaking out the Agrax Earthshade, not the Serephim Sepia. We're going to use this to panel line the sort of shoulder pads. Any panels like this part right here, which I'm painting just off camera. There we go. We're going to get the inside of the shoulder pad. These bits, these sort of vents or, I don't know, weight management. Who knows what those things are. Going to make sure we get the paint in there. We're using a big fat brush. We're risking everything. As you can see, the rest of the miniature has been coated in Ushabti bone and edge highlighted. Now we are bumping up to Elysian green. This is a brand new color for me. Look, it hasn't even been opened. We're using this to edge highlight. As you can see, we've already got a line on it. Almost got me tempted to paint up my 40k Death Guard. The warband was going to be called the Congealed, and they were going to be painted a sort of dark red. Obviously, we are going to use these colors to paint the other shoulder pad, but I'm just trying to show you one sort of chunk of armor at a time getting painted in a different technique, rather than running all over the miniature like I used to. Hopefully, it makes things a bit clearer. I don't know what layer of paint this is. We're just kind of casually going around, building up the opacity and brightness of this color. Get that top of the panel there. Slowly making that line a bit thicker because we're not sort of edge highlighting. I like to do a kind of chunky edge highlight first. All right, look at that edge highlight. That is looking pretty good. Trying to make that line there a bit fatter as well. Trying to match it up with the other side if possible. All right, now here we've got Ogryn camo. This is going to be our final edge highlight. It's quite a bit brighter. Looks like it has a touch of yellow in there to brighten things up. So we're going to get the brush, get the paint, thin it down with a bit of water so it flows smoothly off the brush and use the edge of the brush along the edge of the miniature. Get that raised edge, just like so. There we go. Look at that. That's nice and crisp. Now we just have to replicate that on the other edges of this shoulder pad. All right, that's looking great. Runelord brass. As you can see, we have started painting some of the rivets, some of the studs. I usually start from the top and then sort of work that metal color around the edges, so basically until it touches the surface of the shoulder pad. Takes a bit of time. I usually have a film on and just sort of get to work with it. Once that has been done, break out the Agrax Earthshade. I'm going to put quite a hefty coat down so that it goes all the way around the stud and over the metal in its entirety. We're going to use that Agrax to sort of shade around the rivets. As you can see, it's pulling up. That's fine. I mean, they're Death Guard. A bit of filth probably wouldn't be too bad, but we're also trying to make them somewhat clean at the same time. I suppose it depends how far along they've gone. And it is tinting the surface of this brass as well, which is quite nice. There we go. Moving on to the next part, once that's dried, is... Oh, hello. Sycorax Bronze. This is quite a lot brighter, so there's going to be quite a bit of a jump from the previous color to this color. All right, as you can see right there, we have started on like the vertical upward-facing part of these studs. Unfortunately, it looks like I've painted virtually all of this off camera. Like an absolute idiot. You can just about see where those light spots are going. It's a nice effect and I like it, so that's why I do it. Okay, and this is where I forgot to record painting the lead belcher straps. Now we're breaking out the Nuln oil. We're going to use this to shade the metal that we've painted. I use the exact same techniques elsewhere. For painting the steel, it's just lead belcher. And then you go over it with Nuln oil. And you do it all off camera. Okay, so making sure that Nuln oil gets into all the cracks. Make sure that Nuln oil runs basically down to the armor surface rather than just on the surface of the straps there. So as you can see right there, it's just running along the surface. All right, that's looking pretty good with that Nuln oil on. Now we're coming back with the lead belcher to sort of tidy up that dark color. To sort of go over, add a bit of brightness back to that lead belcher that the Nuln oil gave us. Nice smooth coat. It's very easy. Leave that Nuln oil in the recesses and along the sort of edges of the straps and you'll be good to go. Look at that. Lovely stuff. The brass and the metal looking good, in my opinion. Right. Mephiston red. Looks like we're going to be doing some little lenses. Okay, so I'm going to try and concentrate on just doing one lens at a time. Whether or not I can actually do it is a completely different matter. But I started over at a black lens, as you can see. Working from the center of the helmet outwards, doing a sort of stripe shape. I want a little bit of black. Framing the color, I guess, is what I want to say, if possible. So kind of just do a stripe and not all the way across. We don't want to flood the area with that red. And then within that zone, we want to paint Evil Sunz Scarlet. We're going to go from the center of the face within that red zone that we've previously painted with Mephiston red. Like probably about halfway along that length. It is, as you can see, quite a bit brighter than the previous color. And we have done the second eye as well by the looks of it. Even though I've been trying not to. All right then. And now finally we're going to use Wild Rider Red. This is going to be that sort of central kind of bright spot within these lenses. Right in the center of the helmet. Right there, we want it within that Evil Sunz Scarlet. We don't want to run it any further out than necessary. You could potentially use a different color, potentially a yellow. That could work as well if you wanted to. But I'm just going full kind of red. If you water it, I will say if you water down these colors slightly too much and it ends up flooding the surface, use a dry brush to wick away any excess, and you can always go back and kind of paint that black line in around the color to redefine the shapes. I've had to do it a few times myself. Dorn Yellow. This is going to be our sort of central bit of a glow. Like if we'd gone a brighter yellow before this, we'd still be using this one potentially as our sort of final glow. So just get that in the very center of the helmet pretty much, and that's all we really need to do for it. I like how it looks. Sort of evil, menacing glow. Then finally, we want the specular highlight, a sort of glint of light off the glass of the lens So we want to get the very corner where it's still black. We want a little dot of white. Sometimes it goes completely all over the place. Sometimes it's a disaster. But with a bit of practice, you can do an excellent job of it. As you can see, I think it looks pretty good. We've attached the backpack and the gun. I apologize for basically that whole Ushabti bone area. That was a bit of a disaster and completely my fault. But hopefully we got the point across in the end. And that's basically what you can do. I'm really happy with it. Folks, thanks very much for hanging out with me today as we have painted up this Death Guard Marine. There was a slight wibble at the beginning, but we did manage to get back on course with the sort of a bit of the painting, which went a bit awry. I'm glad we did that. I do have some 40k Death Guard. I still haven't really focused on the paint scheme for them, so we may very well have to get back to this scheme at some point. Now make sure you've liked, subscribed, and indeed hit the bell for notifications, and in next week's video we'll be getting to painting the 1000 Suns. So thank you very much for hanging out, and goodbye.